G'day, fans, and welcome to another exciting episode, the third episode of Fan View. How exciting is this? It's a Monday night. Sarah's wearing a jumper on a really, really hot day. And guess what? This time I've got my pussycat to show off. So there you go. There's my little bubby saying hello to the fans out there. Hello to the fans out there. How you going, pussycat? How you going, Sarah?
I'm good. How are you, Dags?
I am plodding along. What can I say? So it's been a very, very exciting week. A lot of people have been watching the show. We've got people joining us already. Good old Christy saying hello, Sarah and Dags. I like how your name comes first. That's very, very important. Always good to see. And we've got a lot of really important things to discuss over the next, say, 40 minutes. And we've got people, yes, good old Gavin. Yeah, he calls my cat the Bantha, which I think is quite good. There you go. Oh, yes, you're right, Aaron. Sarah is dressed in a giant Doctor Who scarf. So, bit of the old Docky Who for Sarah. What can I say? Absolutely fantastic. Now, if everybody out there is wondering what tonight's discussion is about, we're going to be talking about the old beast on the screen, as I've called it, the power of the gaming industry. And for those who haven't put two and two together, we're obviously talking about video games. So we're not talking about board games or anything along those lines. So Scrabble and Monopoly can get the flick. But what is quite funny, and this will include things like console gaming as well as phones as well. But what's funny is that Aaron, in his infinite wisdom, decided to put together his own little slide for it. How's this? The beast on the scheme. So obviously he might be very talented, but his spelling sucks. So there you go. How about that? So it's Sarah and myself from good old Tron. What do you reckon, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm just pleased that he gave it a red hot go, honestly.
Yeah, I think it looks very, very groovy. So, yes, so that's got all Aaron's workmanship, which is absolutely fantastic. But there you go. But as we said, his spelling leaves a lot to be desired. So before we sort of get into the meat of the discussion, I guess we should probably get through a bit of a history of our own gaming experiences, because Sarah's and I's, that's bad English, Sarah and myself have very, very different sort of like, we come from different eras, and as a result, we sort of play completely different things. And the irony is, of course, that Sarah's still playing games, but I don't actually, pretty much. So it'll be interesting to sort of see how our points of view sort of change as the discussion continues. But Sarah, so to kick yourself off, so to speak, you can't kick yourself off, but you know, to kick things off, I'm going to just, you've got a couple of pictures and everything. You want to just quickly chat about what it is that you used to or still currently play?
Yes, I can go quickly through some of the games of my history. I started playing at a very young age. There's a thing in my family that my dad bought the first computer while my mum was pregnant with me. So I was the same age as the computer in the household. So basically have been gaming on a PC since I can remember. Very early titles included Hugo's House of Horrors, which is a wonderful 8-bit title that I definitely recommend. We then went to the very appropriate for children Duke Nukem. Not as bad as later entries. It was on DOS. It can't really go that crazy. Then, of course, the wonderful Crystal Caves, with the Trouble with Tribbles, a great little Star Trek reference that went completely over my head as a child. We then have, got a little bit older, went into the educational gaming, fell in love with Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego, love watching her steal things. We then have, of course, World of Warcraft, which consumed my life for a number of years. After that, which I still occasionally dabble in that, honestly. We've got Dragon Age, which was probably my next big love affair of a game. Absolutely love the world of that. Still waiting for the next one. Come on, BioWare, where is it? And then we get to the most recent games I've played. Alien Isolation, I played last year during lockdown. A great game to play while you're locked in your own house and unable to do anything. And then Hades, which I have just put down temporarily in order to play the newest game, which I am currently obsessed with, Horizon Forbidden West. So that's a bit of a rundown of the games that I tend to play. How about you, Dags? What's the last game you played?
Well, the last game I played, I'll show you in a second, and it's going to be, you could take a million guesses and you won't get it. So, so for myself, now it's kind of funny, like Aaron, as we said, put up the post earlier, couldn't spell for love or money, and he said, oh, hang on, sorry, he did fix it and sent through the right version. Yeah, right, no, good on you, Turtle. Yes, he sent through the wrong one. Yes, so for myself, so my history goes back way beyond yourself. So for me, it all started in the 1990s, and so There's a few things that I got into, but I didn't really have a lot of computer technology back in the time. But clearly the game that really kicked things off for me was TIE Fighter. So, because, being a Star Wars fan and a fan of the Imperial Empire, I was with my other half at the time. She was into computer science. We had a computer in the house, and TIE Fighter I actually played to death. And now, for those who remember TIE Fighter, you had to go through all the stories, and you end up trying to become part of the Emperor's Inner Circle. I completed the entire thing, had the full tattoo on the arm and everything. Absolutely loved it. So it was really, really groovy. Of course, first-person shooters made their appearances in the 90s with things like Wolfenstein and Doom. And, of course, the Star Wars version of that was Dark Forces. And if you're a Star Wars fan, Dark Forces was an absolute must-have. And I've got to say, that was an absolutely fantastic thing. And, of course, we're using old CRT TVs, CRT monitors back then, of course. But just the story play and everything, it was just fantastic with the old Kyle Katarn, which was particularly groovy. But as the 90s rolled into the 2000s, I morphed away from computer games into Xboxing. Actually, I'm going to rewind that because we haven't got to that point yet. Sorry, before that happened, yes, I did forget. I got into strategy games like Command and Conquer and Red Alert. And Red Alert was the first one I ever played with a LAN, with a local area network with some people, and which was particularly groovy. So that was the first time I got to experience multi-people playing, which was very, very groovy. I completely forgot about that. But they were really revolutionary for their time, and it was really easy to get into them. Then in the 2000s, got into Xboxing, and that was, of course, with things like Halo 2 and Call of Duty 2, which became Call of Duty 4 and all the rest of it. But that was when I got introduced to gaming with friends. We originally started with split screening. So in other words, you have 4 people on one console, and the big projector screen was split into 4. And before, later on, many years later, we got into having our own Xboxes. But that was, I lived on this for most of the 2000s, actually, with myself and my friends, which was particularly groovy. And what I'm playing recently, I'm not playing anything at all. But what I have been playing from an Xbox point of view and from a PC point of view, believe it or not, Forza. So I love car racing, and I do actually play Forza 3. Which I still have connected on the Xbox to the TV, and on a rare occasions, Battlefront 2 or Battlefield 2, which is massively out of date now. But I've got to say that that's sort of my thing. But the key thing that would be different between yourself and myself is the fact you've got another cat in the background. Would be the difference is that, and this is a key thing for what's happened in the past 20 years, is that in my time, it was primarily solo play. You logged into a game, you set it up, you played a campaign or a mission or whatever, and you're pretty much on your own. And a lot of the stuff that I did was on my own. Now, in your case, I'm assuming that a lot of your stuff is all online now. Is that right? In the connectivity with other people around the world?
Look, you'd think so. I have a preference for single player games. I like single player offline games. I did go through a big phase of playing World of Warcraft. That's probably the most online game that I've ever really got into. Just for the most part, I prefer a game that has a really good, strong story that I can play by myself and sort of get out of reality for a bit. That said, there are an incredible amount of good online games out there. I just tend to not play them. Except probably the most recent exception to something online that I've played a lot of would be Animal Crossing.
So Rod has mentioned he's sitting downstairs from you. He's got to reduce himself to Sudoku, online poker, and crosswords. That's a different sort of play. And it's funny because, like, some people still say the solitaire still holds a lot of interest, even despite all the massive amounts of technology we have these days, which is particularly groovy. And ads, yeah, right. That was where when I was Xboxing back in the early 2000s, it was actually at Ads' place, and that really got me into. Well, there was a lot of nights spent there. It's interesting because. When you look at the entire gaming industry, how it's evolved over the past 40 years, we're starting from, say, 1980 through to now, if you will. The key thing is, obviously, computers were in their infancy back in the day. Console gaming in its infant early forms like Atari and all the rest of it came into play. And so there was a real division between what people sort of got into. Then, of course, the graphics on computers got better. So computer games became more advanced, more enticing. But still, for the most part, everybody played, as I said earlier, on their own. And I'm not a computer game expert or video game expert by any means, and I'm not really that au fait with it all. But I believe that from the 2000s, once the internet came into play and online gaming became the go, it opened up an entire Pandora's box for a lot of people to say, I don't want to play games on my own. I want to connect with other people. And as someone who's sort of seen all that firsthand, how have you seen all that sort of evolve over the part in your journey?
Look, honestly, it's so wonderful to be able to play a game online. Sometimes you just want to play against someone and you can't have someone come over. A great example, just recently we've been through lockdowns, and the ability to play a game online meant you could spend a day hanging out with your friends one on one, just having a great time. Even though you weren't physically together, you got to, have that time together. And that's something that games really, they excel at, and they allow you to do in a way that a lot of other mediums, you can't. It's not the same. A lot of other mediums just aren't the same. You can run around and play in a video game together almost as if it was real life, and that's just something incredible. But look, at the end of the day, a good story is a good story, and an offline game is always going to, it's going to have that. A single player offline game is going to have that ability to really tell you that one-on-one, more intimate story and really communicate with you more directly, as opposed to something online where they do have to compete with, people, being dickheads.
Mm. Gavin has mentioned that he's never played online, and funnily enough, I really haven't either. It's not something I'm sort of keen on doing because I've seen firsthand with a lot of people how they become very addicted to it, and this is both computer and console. So I don't know how else to describe it. I can clearly see how once you get to the online thing, you get really involved. And of course, you're dealing with people globally, and of course, different time zones and whatever else. And there's something I'm going to sort of bring up later regarding that. So I tend to agree. I think for me personally, an offline thing still works. But for me, gaming isn't that important anymore. I mean, back in when I was mixing with the guys, so it was funny. We'd go to a guy's place, in this case, Ads's place, hang out there. It was a social thing, and the games just happened to be included. But if you're in a place by yourself, I would personally find the offline thing still would work. But these days, there's such a great push for internet connectivity. A lot of games, especially computer games, you have to have an internet connection, otherwise it won't even load. So they're actually pushing you down that path. And the reason for that is logical because for the most part, you have to pay someone somewhere to get this subscription for the connectivity to play other people. So there's definitely a marketing push as well as an entertainment push. Would you sort of agree with that?
Look, definitely. In terms of making money off games and the business of games, an online game or a game with online components such as microtransactions, it is going to be a much bigger cash cow than something that is offline only, that's single player. That most people are going to play a single player game once through. I'm a completionist. I'm going to get every trophy. I'm going to 100% that game. But once I've played a game, I'm probably not going to. I might play one new game plus, but I'm not going to go and replay it over and over again. Whereas you make an online game and you put a couple of microtransactions in there, some loot boxes, and suddenly you've got years and years of revenue. If you develop a player base that loves it. There are, of course, lots of examples of live service games that have claimed they're going to have years of support, and then of course they don't, because people just don't like the game, and that's always disappointing as well.
Tari said that classics are often the best, which is kind of funny because they do tend to sort of stick around, don't they? And it's interesting to see who classes what as a classic. So does a 40-year-old person say this is a classic versus a teenager, and they say this is a classic, whether they're exactly the same thing? I actually don't know, to be frankly honest with you, but I'd be curious to sort of see how that works out. There's a lot of comments here about who's been playing what and who had what, and there's like computers here and Amstrad 464 tapes. I remember that from the 80s. You actually have to load audio tapes. Greg has mentioned about the Commodore 64. Everybody has a different story and a different experience. And it's funny how, 4-player GoldenEye. Yes, I remember that was Nintendo, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Nintendo 64. And I remember that quite vividly. Friends turn up with a Nintendo 64, plugged into the TV, and it just works straight away. It's like, oh my God, this is revolutionary. The interesting thing is that because there is such a big push for what's happening on the internet now, and so many people to sort of join online, you do wonder, and as I agree with what you said, with the offline stories, you can actually get a lot out of it, but there's a lot of push by the manufacturers and the marketing people to actually get people to sign up and subscribe and spend the money and whatever else. And this is where you start getting into that furry line of saying, okay, where it becomes entertainment to another form of life, if you will, and where the online connectivity is more important than dealing with, say, real life scenarios. Now, I found that when we got together for our Xboxing sessions, as I said earlier, it was a huge social thing. We all got together, we had a few laughs, played the games in between. But if you're online in your home and then you're spending hours upon hour upon hour upon hour dealing with people you never get to see, I personally think that the people who are manufacturing the games are doing this deliberately to ensure that people do stay connected for as long as physically possible, because in the end, that's how they sort of win market share. So does that make sense?
Absolutely. Look, a fun little factoid about me, I studied in university. I actually studied games design, so that is my background. I didn't graduate, but I still learned a lot. And one of the things that we discussed about games design is, as gamers, you want to say, no, it's not. Games aren't addictive. Games aren't going to impact you. Not going to change you. They're not going to do anything like that. But at the same time, you've got to be realistic. And games are designed to be realistic. Psychologically, they are designed to be dopamine drips, and they are designed to get you hooked and get you really pulled into that. And they are designed to make money off you in the same way that gambling is. The most obvious is them bringing in loot boxes to gaming. So when loot boxes became commonplace in gaming, that's a game of slots. That's a slot machine. And it's very easy to say, no, it's just a mechanic. But no, it is literal gambling, and is literal gambling that is often directed at kids. And that's something that you've got to work your way around, and you've got to remember that is something that is at the core of it. That is the basic industry of games is making money. And if they want to make money, they're going to do it in the best ways possible, and the best way possible is to get you hooked on it.
We'll touch on the kid things later on. There is something I do want to discuss regarding that, because that's actually really, really significant. My question to you is there a reason why you don't play more online games? Is it for what you just mentioned a few months ago?
There's a couple of reasons. Now, I played a lot of World of Warcraft when I was younger. So one of the reasons was my computer. I was a PC gamer back in the day, and my computer couldn't play a lot of the online games. I could play World of Warcraft, but that was very low processing power. But a lot of the others I couldn't. I didn't actually get my first console until later in life. I was a PC only gamer for a long, long time. And then when I did start console playing, by that stage, I was sort of out of the habit of playing online. I don't want to, name the elephant in the room, but, sexism online is a big part of why I don't play online. It is very common to, have people, be like, oh my God, there's a girl in the game. Yeah. Oh my God. And then start, having a go at you. And it's just, I can live without that. It's fine when I'm playing with friends, obviously. But when I'm playing just in an open lobby, like, there's enough sexism in day-to-day life. I don't need to, put myself in front of it online unless I really love a game.
No, Vic, I totally get that, and that makes complete sense too. The one thing, and I have to mention this now because I will forget, and so you had, and there was a ridiculous abbreviation, massive multiplayer online role-playing games. Remember the whatever.
MMORPGs, yes.
Yeah, I had to think of a better name. You can never remember it. When all that started coming out, and I think like there was like Star Wars Galaxies was one, Second Life I know was the other. I never played any of these, but I did hear about them. And that was introducing a scenario where people could live another life, if you will, in a VR world with other people around the world, if that makes sense. Did you ever I think World of Warcraft was, no, it wasn't one of those. Was it?
It was. World of Warcraft was an MMORPG.
Yep, gotcha. So how did you find like the idea of like people living if you literally will, a second life online?
Look, we used to talk about it back when I was in World of Warcraft. My guild, we would talk about it like how somebody would go bowling a couple of times a week. Somebody might join a bowling team, and one night a week was bowling night, and they went bowling, and everyone just respected that was their bowling night. And as gamers, there is the stigma that what we were doing was somehow, it somehow wasn't right. It was somehow unusual, or it's not something that was encouraged and socially acceptable, at least at the time. But at the same time, a lot of people were just spending one night a week playing this game. But then there were other people that, every time you logged on, they were online. And, they talked to you about, their relationships breaking down because that's all they did. So it's really a balancing thing. In the world of games design, they talk about, and microtransactions, they talk about whales. Now, whales are people that spend a lot of money online, and they are actually a vast minority of the people that play online games. Now, whales are the people that it is an issue with them. They are people that they are spending more money online than is necessary. They are probably people that have addictive personalities, and they're probably people that honestly are using games to treat mental illness that they are experiencing. There are, of course, exceptions. There are people that just fall in love with a game. But the people that are spending thousands and thousands of dollars on a game, often there is something else going on there. And look, that is a minority. It is a minority. But we've got to remember that those people do exist and they are part of the community. And to say they're not, it's really doing everyone a disservice.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's very interesting because I heard a person that I knew said that a person. I'm trying to explain this in real life. All these people were playing Second Life. One of the people who was playing a character died in real life, and because they actually had a funeral for this real life person in Second Life as their avatars, and I thought that was an interesting sort of real blurring between the real world and the fake world, if you will. And I thought if you could, and this is heading into the path of virtual reality. So where you put on the headset and you like immerse yourself in the 3D world and you move around. That's obviously the next step. But if there's a huge demand for people to exist in a world that has world building within it, rather than just saying we're just going to complete missions here, there, and everywhere, it's an interesting sort of step to see where it's going to go. And I don't know if there's the hack and slash games on this side are far more popular than the massive multiplayer, blah, 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 role-playing games, if that makes sense. So do you think there's you get people who just stick with one or the other and there's very little crossover on both? Have you found that in your travels?
There are people like that. There are people that that's their genre and they stick to it. I know people that they only play racing games. They love racing cars online and that's all they do. That's all they want to do. They have no interest in anything else. I've known people that, they only play games on their Nintendo Switch. They really love their Nintendo Switch. It's their favorite thing, and that's all they want to do. Hell, I watch a lot of videos from people that play The Sims 4. I don't really play The Sims 4 anymore. I don't have time to, but I watch other people play it because it's entertaining, and that's all they play, really. That's the main thing they play. They might play other simulators, but they really are only interested in simulation. And then there are other people I like to play a bit of everything. I dabble in everything, but the games that really, they have my heart, those are story-based narrative games. The mechanics are actually secondary for me. I just want a good story in a game. But that's me personally. So yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, that's okay. It's all cool. Now, there's a number of comments here. I'm going to go through them. So Natasha said about she prefers playing like Call of Duty online because she finds the joy of killing people as opposed to bots. I makes a lot of sense because people are at least highly skilled versus bots, and that makes a lot of sense. You would get a lot of satisfaction from that. And I think a lot of adults would take a lot of joy in killing teenagers. Young kids are just giving the shits. It's just the natural. Yeah, it's the natural thing, isn't it? Yeah, exactly right. Gavin came up with a really good one. It's funny how there's sexism, as you said, with a lot of guys playing female characters. That is an interesting one. I
know the reason why a lot of guys play female characters.
I'm going to take a stab. I think I know what the reason is, but you go for it.
When you're playing and you're in a third-person game, you're seeing a character's butt constantly. That is your camera view. A lot of guys want to look at a lady butt.
Yeah,
they prefer a lady butt than a guy butt. So
no, I tend to disagree. I think it's mainly because there are guys who might be sexist towards women, but when they get to play female characters, it's actually a part of themselves that they're not prepared to admit who they are.
That too. I'm being very crass and very basic about it, but a lot of guys I knew, they would say that was the reason that they always play girl characters.
Yep, totally agree. Gavin Napkins, heaven help the girl who plays a guy. Anyway, there was a few things. Why are there so many? So, Colin, why are gamers online so against the female online gamer? The primary reason would be that males, will use young teenage adolescent males, would be put off by the fact that they've been beaten by a girl. That's the reason why they would see it as a threat, right? And they can't handle.
It's the same reason that sexism exists everywhere. Look, sometimes, people just, there are people out there that they forged a space for themselves. This is their space. This is where they feel safe. For whatever reason, they have an issue with girls. They have issue with women.
Yep.
And when women come into that space, they feel threatened. They feel challenged. And so they attack the woman. Sometimes it's the whole, primary school, I like her, so I'm going to be mean to her. But most of the time, it's just, they feel threatened. So unfortunately, it's just a fact of life.
Yeah, and it's easy to work that one out. Back on the role-playing thing, and I agree with Aaron on this one. A lot of people did invest a lot of time and money into these things, especially Star Wars Galaxies, and then of course when they close it down, it would be like losing a friend. And of course, the hard part with that would be that if you did invest building this entire world with all these people in artificial people who are real people, if that makes sense, if you didn't connect with them afterwards, say, quick, give me your details so I can connect with you after this thing's closed down, you just lose all these people. And I can understand that would actually be very depressing for a lot of players. I can sort of sympathize with that because it is another life. And I once, back in the 1990s, got literally addicted to internet chat rooms. And that's one of the reasons why I stay off online gaming. One of the reasons. Put me in a holiday games. There's a lot of, I was miles behind on the messages here. Addiction is risky. Okay. So look, we've got just over 15 minutes to go. We might as well get into that. So this is the thing that I'm finding interesting, right? So when offline gaming existed, say in the 80s and the 90s, people played them for fun. They got together, they had a few laughs. If they were doing LAN games, local area network games, they get together, bring their computers, plug them in, play a game, go home, done, right? With the advent of online playing, more and more people are spending virtually their entire lives in front of a screen. And it's coming to a point, it's actually come to a point where people are more comfortable, whether it be young, old, male, female, looking at a screen, playing games, than mixing with others in the real world. And there is a point where you're thinking, okay, where does the line between they're addicted to it versus they feel safe with it come into play? And I think you would, and I certainly know of many examples of people, including especially young people, who are so addicted and so obsessed with playing games online that they're actually suffering in the real world. Now, what are your thoughts on that? Because it's a bit of a social problem in a lot of ways. What are your thoughts?
It's complicated. So in many ways, online gaming addiction, it is an addiction, but at the same time, it is usually, honestly, it's somebody self-medicating with mental health issues. They are doing something which is an easy source of joy, an easy source of feelings of success and reward, because games, they give you rewards. They give you, when you level up, you get the nice, the big sparkly lights in the game, and they give you literal things for achieving a goal. You get achievements, and it's very easy for somebody who's struggling with their real life to gravitate towards something where they are quantifiably succeeding. And that's the reason why I don't think it's so straightforward as game bad, shouldn't play. Take game away from child, or take game away from person who is struggling with this. It is really a much deeper issue. It's a massive issue of mental health, and it's basically a maladaptive coping strategy. It's a maladaptive practice that somebody has developed. So I know I was very addicted to online games when I was in high school. It was basically because I was unhappy. I didn't have much else going for me. I didn't have that many friends, and it was a lot easier to deal with stuff online than, go out and have an anxiety attack talking to humans. Online, the risk factor's lower, but I still get the same socialization. Online, I get the reward of doing things in game that, it's not as it's challenging, but the challenge is not as confronting as the real world. And I don't know, it's a very complicated one. I have very mixed feelings about it.
Now, I agree. First thing, I agree. There's a lot of comments, and I don't know if I'll ever get through them. I agree with you. Taking the game off a person is not the answer. Totally, I get that, right? And of course, maybe regulating a little bit might be a move. But it's very interesting that you said what you did about the fact that people are saying, "Oh, I can't handle the real world. I'll play in the game. I feel like I'm achieving something. I get points. I get to meet with other people and all the rest of it." But the problem is, it's still an artificial world, right? It's still a screen, and you're sitting in front of a screen in a room by yourself, potentially for hours and hours, days and days and days. And the real world, as much as you might not like it, I'm not talking about you personally, but I'm talking about other
Of
people.
course, I
Uh,
know.
you can't avoid it. Now, the issue is, as I see it, that I mean, a lot of games are obviously marketed to younger people. There's an absolute no-brainer about that, right? And it makes sense because ultimately, if they get hooked, they'll spend the money. And I mean, you're right. It is a money-making business. Money first, entertainment second. All good. I think we're all aware of the issue. But then where does it go? How far does it go? Right? To the point where you have younger people of any generation who get so hooked into these things that when the time comes, they've spent 15 years of their life in front of a screen. When they do, aside from having vision problems and aside from the fact they can't sleep properly and the fact that they can't talk to anybody physically in real life, I mean, will it reach a point where someone somewhere says, hang on, we got to put some regulations in place because it is now impacting the development of people. When that never happened 20, 30 years ago, but it's happening now. And I can cite examples. I know you can too. So
Yeah.
how do you see it like in the next decade, say by 2032, 10 years from right now? Do you think anything will have changed or you reckon that something somewhere is going to tip the scales a bit? What are your thoughts?
Look, I hope so. I know a lot of games and consoles and well, games themselves and consoles, they both come with parental controls these days. So that's something that, puts a bit of power back in the parents' hands. And if we're specifically talking about children, look, it is something that I think children should be regulated online. There does need to be, a limit on what kids have access to. A lot of parents out there think all games are fine for all kids. And the R18 rating on games, it exists for a reason. Games are not for kids. There are some very confronting things. It's not just violence. Sometimes there will be themes in a game that, as an adult, they'll keep me up all night. I'll be thinking about, a choice I had to make in a game where, there was a no-win situation and somebody always was going to die and the consequences of that. And that's something you shouldn't be putting on someone too young. They won't understand it. But look, I like to believe we're going to end up with a situation where there are regulations, where things like loot boxes and gambling mechanics are restricted to younger players. But the problem is always going to be the attitude of parents and the attitude of society at large, where we do, for a lot of the people, they view gaming as this juvenile thing that is for kids. And so they think there can't possibly be anything really that bad in it, but not realizing that there definitely can be. And there are definitely things out there that we do need to protect kids from online.
Yeah, because it's an interesting scenario. Because I know of three people. I'm not mentioning any names. Younger people, and two of them have been seriously, I class as mentally impacted by just the gaming addiction, and these are all under these teenagers, right? And the third one is, I think, okay, if you want to use the term okay, but has no social skills. So, in other words, even when there's visitors to the house, just lives in the room. That's it. Doesn't even come out to say hello. And that's just three examples. But one of the three is in a really bad way, like really bad. He's like he's got no hope, right? And you're thinking, okay, if there's three people that I know personally, there must be shitloads of others all around the world. And I think you hear the stories of people who get so invested into the screen that it impacts their physical development. Now, of course, if you push it into adulthood, and of course, there are a lot of adults doing exactly the same thing, and it makes sense because I completely agree with you. The drive, the entertainment, the desire to be a part of this entire thing, and the fact that you are communicating with other people is very, very appealing. Now, it would be interesting to see if the people who are really hooked into this are those who do struggle with the real world, or the introverts, if you will. I can't think of any other word, or whether they're extroverts who just happen to then also live online. I don't know what the answer is. Off the top of your head, based on what you know, do you think that that could possibly be the case? So if you get, say, we'll use adults now who are really, really dialed into online gaming, they're the introverts who don't deal well with other people in the real world, if that makes any sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, look, that makes sense. Look, to some extent, to some extent, there are always going to be those people. There are going to be those people that they choose to exist online rather than in the real world. But at the same time, there are a lot of very well-adjusted people that are huge gamers, and they spend as much of their free time as they can possibly justify playing games. I like to believe I'm relatively well-adjusted, and I spend a lot of time playing video games. I think I'm up to 120 hours or something like that on Horizon Forbidden West. It only came out a couple of weeks ago.
I wouldn't class you in the same category as some of the other people that I'm thinking of, not by a long shot, because the fact you're on this show right now is a testament to that. Rather, you can say, no, I'm too busy playing games. I like this one from Tari, a novel idea, parents and actually parenting. Yeah, that's a good point. And this is another issue, Mark, and we see this all the time. I had a friend every time they saw their kid on the iPad and iPhone, no interaction at all. And unfortunately, that is a very common thing in modern day society, but by the same token, that might not be a gaming thing. That could just be a technological thing, pretty colors and whatever else. And I don't. We're all aware of it. We all see it. We all know it's there. And it didn't exist once upon a time, but now it does exist. And you do wonder if it's going to have an impact on the world at large at some point. So yes, because the last thing you would want. I mean, imagine the scenario is saying, "Well, I used to be friends with Fred, but I don't see Fred anymore. Fred's too busy living online." And I know people who did get seriously addicted to World of Warcraft. That was it. They're all gone. Never saw them again, right? You see them online, no worries. But see them invite them to parties and events and whatever, they wouldn't turn up. They're too busy.
Only if the server was down, yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, if that could happen then, this is like 10-something years ago, then I can't even begin to imagine what it's like now. Now, before we finish up, and I know there's probably a lot more we could discuss on this, but we don't want to go too far. So obviously events like this is a completely different sort of direction. Things like PAX, when PAX comes up, it's massive, it's gigantic. For a period of time, it was the only place outside of America that were holding these events was in PAX here in Melbourne. Obviously, I imagine that you're a regular attendee. So do you reckon that's like the one social thing that non-social people will attend because it's the place to go to? What are your thoughts on events like PAX?
Look, I just want to quickly address the fact that you're saying that a lot of gamers are non-social people. I studied games design, so I was in a course full of people that are just gamers. I also do a lot of work with other gamers, and gamers are some of the most social people you will ever meet. We're just looking for our tribe. We're just looking for other people that understand us. We normally get them online, but they are in person too. And if we have an event where there are a bunch of gamers together, we are going to have an excellent time. I'm just going to say that.
I'm going to cut you off. I wasn't saying that they're not social. I was saying that some might be, some might be. I wasn't like putting them into one.
I just wanted to address that, just to make sure that we've got that. I'm sorry, what was your question again?
That's right. I was just talking about events like PAX, and obviously you're right. A lot of people do attend these things and all the rest of it. So, and the fact that they're so successful now, these large events. So, I take it you've attended them before.
All of them, yeah. I've been to every PAX. Well, in Australia. Unfortunately, I haven't been to any international ones yet. And it's a fantastic event, and it does really show you the joy of the gaming community and really what that community can bring when they are brought outside. There's always downsides to the gaming community. There's always negatives to the gaming community, but an event like that is just so optimistic about what the future of the gaming industry is and what the future of gamers is. And that's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I tend to agree with you. I think by and large it's all great and wonderful, but there is a small element that is unhealthy, and I'd be curious to see where it ends up. And it is, but it's small, but maybe not that small. So it's could be, and like it's mentioned here. Anyway, from ads, just very quickly. She'll may have the development issue, find escape through the game, chicken or the egg. Yeah, exactly right. Unfortunately, and regardless of how much you enjoy the games and how much you enjoy being online, the real world is out there and it is ready to eat people alive. And I think that if someone says, "Oh no, I'm just going to escape into the screen," that's fine and well. But at some point, you still need electricity to power the damn machines. And if you haven't paid the electricity bill, that ain't going to happen. So, and that's dealing with the real world. So I do wonder. Sorry, you're going to say something?
I was just going to say, look, there's also that thing we also need to remember about humans is panic of the new. So when newspapers first were developed, so the printing press and newspapers became commonplace, there were people that complained that people were no longer talking to each other on public transport because they were just they were reading the newspaper. And then, TVs came around and there are people complaining the kids aren't going outside and playing, they're just staring at the TV, they've got square eyes. And then, gaming, and now phones. And then the next one was phones. Now everyone's just on their phones. So people are always going to, find excuses not to interact with each other. But as long as it's measured and regulated and it doesn't become an addiction, I think it's mostly it's more okay than what we see in the media. We see a lot of the negative in the media, and I think there's more positive than there is negative. The negative is definitely there, but you've just got to measure it and balance it.
Well, it's a good point, because I remember when Dungeons and Dragons, the board game, came out, people said it was associated with worshipping the devil and Antichrist and all that other rubbish. And it's like, yeah, right, good on you guys. So, yes, very, very cool. Good stuff. All right, there's a lot more we could obviously discuss, but we don't want to run over time, which you're just about to do. Any final words before we sign off for this evening?
My only final words is everyone go play a video game. Go find something that you like and play it tonight.
Yes, we should invent a game.
Yes.
Invent a game based on this show. I love the sound of that. So there you go. Yes. Very, very good. Someone can play your avatar. Someone can play my avatar. And as you said, play the third person. You get to look at Sarah's backside and have a whale of a time. So there you go. Which someone read, right? The people that said, oh, no, they actually do like looking at their characters' asses. And I go, whatever, dude. Anyway, we'll leave you all to it, and we'll see you all next week, which we're going to be discussing the addiction, speaking of addiction, of course, with collectibles and collecting. Oh, there's something, Sarah and I have something in common, so yay team. So there you go. But otherwise, I agree with you, Sarah. Go out and play games. So get out away from it. I mean, who wants to be a part of the real world anyway? It sucks. So, all right, we'll leave you to it, and we'll see you all next week. Okay, bye for now.
Bye.